Welcome to the deep dive. You know, all those articles and studies and books piling up. Well, we read them so you don't have to.
And we get to the good stuff.
Exactly. Today we're diving into the psychology of decision-making to figure out what's actually going on in our brains when we're, trying to choose between, I don't know, that salad.
Oh, that donut.
Oh, you know me so well. But really, have you ever wondered why you make certain choices even when you know there might be a better option?
Like, why do we sometimes sabotage ourselves?
Right. Well, our source says there are actually two different systems at work in our brains when we make decisions.
Intriguing, right?
I'm hooked already.
Well, let's start with the idea of intuition. We all have gut feelings. Sometimes we call them instincts, but why are they so powerful? Turns out, emotions are actually really important in making good choices. They're signals from our brains.
Hold on. Are you saying that, like, not in my stomach when I'm about to hit send on a risky email is valuable information?
Think of it this way. Emotions are like a guidance system. They help us navigate all the choices we face every day.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the source had this great example. Imagine a firefighter running into a burning building. They don't have time to stop and analyze everything. They rely on their gut feelings,
Oh, those split-second decisions.
Exactly. Those can be life or death. And they're driven by emotion. But, and this is important, it doesn't mean every decision should be based just on emotion.
Right. You don't want me running into any burning buildings.
Exactly.
But how about for the rest of us who aren't, facing those kind of situations every day? How do we learn to trust our intuition for, like, regular choices, like what to eat or which job offer to take?
It starts with paying attention to yourself, being aware. Noticing the patterns in how you feel and what causes those feelings. But here's the thing, your intuition isn't always right.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we have these things called biases that can mess us up.
Ah, those pesky biases. I've heard that word before, but to be honest, I'm not totally sure what they are. Can you explain it?
Basically, it's like our brains are trying to be efficient, so they develop shortcuts to process all the information coming at us.
That makes sense. Our brains are busy.
Right. But sometimes that efficiency comes at a price. The source talked about one called the availability heuristic. It explains why people might be afraid to fly, even though driving is actually more dangerous statistically.
Real?
Yeah. It's all about what comes to mind easily. Like, if you just saw a news report about a plane crash, that image is going to be really vivid in your memory, even though those events are super rare.
So you're saying my fear of flying might be my brain kind of playing tricks on me. It's using a shortcut that's not giving me the whole picture.
Exactly. And that's just one example. There are so many different types of biases, and they affect all sorts of things, from how we judge people to how we spend our money.
I bet.
Mm.
What are some other examples of biases?
Well, the source also talked about something called anchoring bias. Imagine you're buying a used car, and the seller starts by giving you this crazy high price.
Oh, yeah?
That number sticks in your head, right?
Absolutely.
Even if you know it's way too much, it's like an anchor.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
Exactly. And you might end up paying more than you should simply because that first number influenced how you see what's reasonable.
Wow. So these biases could really mess up our decisions. Can we do anything about them? Can we, like, rewire our brains?
Yeah, you're getting to the really interesting part. Turns out our brains don't just use these shortcuts. They actually have two different ways of thinking that are constantly working. The source calls them System 1 and System 2.
Two systems. Okay, now I'm really curious. Two systems, huh? So, like, my brain has an autopilot and a manual mode.
You got it. And System 1, that's your autopilot. That's the fast, intuitive thinking that helps you, I don't know, dodge a ball or recognize a friend in a crowd.
Makes sense.
But remember those shortcuts we talked about?
Yeah, the biases.
Well, System 1 relies on those, so it's super efficient, but as we've seen, not always accurate.
Okay, but if my autopilot is, like, prone to errors, what's the point of even having it? When does it actually help?
Think about it. System 1 is all about speed. It's essential for survival. Imagine you're crossing the street and a car comes speeding at you. You don't have time to, like, sit there and weigh your options, right? You need to react instantly.
Yeah.
That's System 1 taking over, keeping you safe. But when it comes to more complex decisions, things like planning for retirement or figuring out your career, that's when System 2 comes in.
So System 2 is more deliberate, like my thinking cap.
Exactly. System 2 is your inner Sherlock Holmes, carefully examining the evidence and making logical choices.
Sounds exhausting.
Well, it does take effort. It's like flexing a muscle. You can't do it all the time.
That's probably why I feel so mentally drained after a day of, like, making tough decisions. It's like System 2 is just wiped out. So how do I know when to use which system? Is there a formula or something?
Yeah. That's the million-dollar question. Luckily, our source, the psychology of decision making, offers some really great strategies to help us figure that out. And a lot of it starts with your goals and values.
Okay, that makes sense.
What do you really want to achieve in life? What are the things that guide your choices?
Like my moral compass.
Yeah, exactly. When you're clear about those things, it's like having a map, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You can ask yourself, does this choice fit with what's really important to me?
Oh, I see. If I don't even know where I'm going, how can I make good decisions to get there?
Exactly. And once you've got those goals and values figured out, then comes the fun part, gathering information.
Research.
Exactly. Don't just go with your gut. Do some digging. Read articles, talk to people, get different perspectives. The more information you have, the better decisions you can make.
Right, but with so much information out there, how do I know what to trust? It's so easy to just get overwhelmed.
That's where critical thinking comes in. Be a discerning consumer of information, you know what I mean? Question things, look for evidence. Don't just accept everything you hear.
Got it.
And here's a tip from the source. Don't just look for information that agrees with what you already think. Challenge yourself to look at different viewpoints. You might be surprised by what you learn.
Keep an open mind. I
Yeah.
like it. But even after all that, sometimes I just get stuck in this loop of, what if I make the wrong choice?
Yeah.
It's like the fear of regret can be paralyzing.
Oh, tell me about it. The fear of regret, we all struggle with that. But the source had this really interesting perspective on it. It said that no decision is perfect. There's always going to be some uncertainty, and that's okay. The key is to shift your focus from avoiding regret to embracing the learning experience.
Like, so you're saying I should actually be grateful for my bad decisions?
Think of it this way. Every decision, good or bad, is a chance to learn and grow. If you make a choice that doesn't work out the way you planned, don't beat yourself up about it. Just ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to make better choices in the future?
So it's about seeing those quote-unquote mistakes as valuable lessons.
Exactly. But I know it's still tough to shake that feeling of what if?
Yeah.
What else can we do to ease that fear? Well, this is where the source talked about mindfulness and self-reflection. It's about taking the time to really tune into your own thoughts and feelings when you're making a decision.
Oh, interesting.
You know, what are your motivations? What biases might be at play? What are you afraid of?
So it's like turning on the lights in my own head so I can actually see what's going on.
That's a great way to put it. But how does all this connect back to living a more fulfilling life? The source mentioned that, right?
Yeah, it did. And that's really what I'm most interested in. So we've talked about intuition and all those biases that sneak in, and even the two systems our brains use to make choices. We even talked about how to deal with regret. But how does all this lead to actually living a better life, one that's more fulfilling?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And the source really nailed it, I think. It said that a fulfilling life comes from making choices that line up with your values.
Values, okay.
Like, think about it. If you're always making choices that go against what you believe in, deep down, it's going to create some inner conflict. It's like you said, trying to build a house on sand. It's just not stable.
You know, that's so true. When I think back on times when I felt like really unhappy, it was often because I was doing things I thought I should be doing or what other people expected of me instead of listening to my own gut.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in all those outside pressures and lose track of what's truly important to us. But when our choices are rooted in our values, that's when we feel a sense of purpose. Like everything just clicks.
Okay, so how do we get better at making those kinds of choices?
Yeah.
It's easy to say, listen to your heart, but how do we actually do that, especially with like a million options swirling around us all the time?
Well, remember those mindfulness and self-reflection things we talked about?
Yeah.
That's where it starts. Take some time to really think about your values. What are the principles that make you, you? How do you want to live your life? Writing things down can be helpful. Just get those thoughts and feelings out, no judgment.
Journaling. You know, I've tried that before, but I never really thought about it as a way to make better decisions. I'm definitely going to try it again. It's like shining a light on all those hidden beliefs and things that might be driving my choices without me even realizing it.
Exactly. Bringing those things to the surface so you can make more deliberate choices, you know? And remember, it's a process. It's not about being perfect at it all the time. It's about experimenting and finding what works for you.
I like that. It takes the pressure off. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to always make the right decision. But you're saying it's more about learning and growing as we go.
Exactly. It's about embracing those imperfections and using them as fuel to learn. And no decision is ever final, right? You can always adjust, change course, learn from it all.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools to approach decisions in a way that will hopefully make me happier and more fulfilled.
It's been great exploring this with you. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. What's one small change you can make today, right now, based on what we've talked about?
Ooh, I like that.
Maybe take a few breaths before making a choice, or think about your values before saying yes to something. Even tiny changes can make a big difference over time.
Absolutely. Understanding how our minds work is the key to unlocking our full potential when it comes to making decisions, big or small. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.